So a viewer asked me about a blockchain a couple of days ago, and I gave him an answer. Then I went and checked, and my answer was wrong. Here's the comment. For the King, one of the sharpest people in this community, he wrote, "What do you think about Root Network? Seems like it's dying, but the infrastructure looks built out." And I told him, "Look, great rails, waiting on the traffic." Yeah. So then I called the chain myself. And what came back was stranger than either of us thought. The Root Network went live on the 30th of September, 2022. I know that because I pulled block number 1 and decoded the timestamp out of it myself. 3 years later, to the day, receivers walked into the company that built it. By December, creditors voted to liquidate, and the chain never stopped. It's producing a block every 4 seconds right now, while I'm talking. 25 validators, still named after a company that legally does not exist. This is Root Network 101, and it's the cleanest test I've ever seen of what decentralized infrastructure means when the money runs out. So to understand this, you go back to Auckland, New Zealand. There was a company called Centrality, and in January 2018, they ran a token sale and raised about $100 million in under 6 minutes. And here's the part I respect. Over 265 million got pledged, and they held the cap at 100 anyway. That's Centrality's own write-up. They built a chain called SenseNet. Then, in July 2022, they took its open source code, forked it, and started a completely separate chain. That new chain is the Root Network, and existing holders weren't force-marched across. They were given a choice. Then came the roll-up. December 2022, 8 Web3 companies merged into one thing called Futureverse. And in July 2023, they raised $54 million in a Series A led by 10T Holdings, with Ripple Labs participating. Driving it were Aaron McDonald, co-founder and CEO, and Shara Senderoff, the other co-founder. And the ambition was enormous. One identity, one set of assets, working across every game and virtual world you touch. Now here's where I want to be fair, because the easy version of this story is crypto company hypes things and dies. That's not what the engineering shows. Root is built on Substrate, same toolkit Polkadot uses, with a full Ethereum virtual machine compiled straight into it. And block making is split in two. A system called Babe runs a lottery every 4 seconds to pick who writes the next page in the notebook. Then Grandpa stamps a batch of those pages as permanent. But here's the one that surprised me. On most chains, a token from somewhere else shows up as a wrapper, an IOU. On the Root Network, XRP is the native currency. Their own documentation says it plainly. The native currency used for balances, for paying gas fees, and for value transfers is XRP. And Root, the project's own token, that's the one exposed as a contract. So it's backwards from what almost everybody assumes. That connects back to Ripple, because there's a real bridge to the XRP ledger here, where deposits pass through a challenge window and relayers get punished if they lie. Now, one correction, because I'd rather you hear it from me. Those FIFA games you've seen mentioned with this project don't run on the Root Network. FIFA Rivals is Mythical Games on their Mythos chain. FIFA Collect moved to FIFA's own blockchain. The real Futureverse and FIFA product is a much smaller game, FIFA AI League. Okay, so this is the part most coverage either misses or gets secondhand. I didn't want a crypto news article. I went to the New Zealand Government Gazette, the official register where insolvency notices legally have to be published. What's on it isn't ambiguous. Notice 2025 AR 5557. And I'll read you the actual sentence. On the 30th of September 2025, we were appointed joint and several receivers and managers of the assets and undertaking of the above named company by 50T Holdings, pursuant to a general security deed dated the 10th of May 2025. So sit with those two dates. The security was signed on the 10th of May, called in on the 30th of September. 4.5 months from fresh financing to receivers walking through the door. And one thing I want to nail down, because I saw it confused in 3 separate places. The lender is 50T Holdings, 50, formerly One Roundtable Partners. That is not 10T Holdings, the firm that led the Series A. Different entity. Then it got worse. A second notice, AL7484. On the 16th of December, creditors voted under the Companies Act to liquidate Futureverse Corporation Limited outright. That's not a rumor. It's a public legal record you can read yourself in 30 seconds. So that's the paperwork. But I wanted to know what the machine says. The machine doesn't do press releases. I connected straight to a root network node and did something you can reproduce. Once a month, back to the very beginning, I sampled 300 blocks in a row, about 20 minutes of chain time, and counted one thing. Is there anything in here besides the mandatory timestamp? Because an empty block still gets a timestamp. Anything beyond that is somebody doing something. And the shape of what came back stopped me. Through the middle of 2025, this chain was alive. August was the busiest point in my whole sample. Over 170 of those 300 blocks carrying real activity. 1st of September, still 130. Then my 1st of October sample, 9. 9 out of 300. That's roughly a 95% collapse. And the receivers were appointed on the 30th of September, right in the gap between those two samples. Now, I want to be careful because this is where people overreach. I'm telling you 2 dates that line up. I'm not telling you one caused the other because I can't prove that. But it kept falling. December, 3 out of 300. February and March, 1. And from April this year through today, 0. Not a low number, 0. So then I did the big one, 21,600 blocks, back to back, a full 24 hours of chain time, every single block. And across that entire day, exactly 2 blocks carried anything at all. The project's own explorer says 1 transaction over the same window. It counts a little differently to me. I'm counting everything, including the chain's own housekeeping. Either way, that's a full day of activity you can count on one hand. Against 9.2 million transactions in its lifetime and 7 million wallets ever created. And then I found the real lesson here. And King, this is the part I'd most want you to see. Substrate chains ship with governance built in. A council, elections, referenda, a treasury, it's all in the code. And this project's marketing talked about token holders governing the network. So I read the chain's own memory directly. And before trusting a single answer, I checked my method, asked it the current block number the same way, and it came back matching the live height exactly. Then I asked the real questions. How many council members? Nothing. Proposals ever submitted? Nothing. Elections ever run? Nothing. Referenda in the chain's whole history? Nothing. In 3 years and 10 months, not one. The machinery is sitting right there, fully built, and nobody ever switched it on. But one thing did come back with an answer. There's a module called sudo, and sudo is exactly what it sounds like to anyone who's used a computer. One account that can do anything, override anything, no vote required. That key is live, populated, sitting there. So when the company hit trouble, there was no way for a community to route around it. There was never a steering wheel installed, just one key. And you see it again in the validators. The chain is configured for 51 validator slots. I read that straight out of the runtime. 25 are filled. Half the seats empty. And look what those validators are called. Futureverse Node 10, Futureverse Node 14, Futureverse Node 24. The company is in liquidation. Its nodes are still showing up for work, every 4 seconds, all day. So, for the king. Here's your answer, and I owe you a correction first. I told you this was great rails waiting on the traffic. That was wrong. Waiting implies the traffic hasn't turned up yet. It turned up. August 2025 was the busiest month this chain ever had, and then it left. Your instinct that something was dying was closer to the truth than my reply, and you deserve to hear me say that. But here's why I don't think dead is the right word either. The rails are still there, physically running. The documentation is still up, and it's proper documentation, pallet by pallet. The Explorer is live. The source is publicly mirrored. And 25 machines are still finalizing a block every 4 seconds, never missing a beat through a receivership and a liquidation, which is, weirdly, the technology working exactly as advertised. So here's the takeaway, and it transfers to every project you'll ever look at. First, separate the chain from the company. Two different things, two different fates, and this is the clearest example I've found. Second, look for the governance before you need it, not whether the code exists, whether it's ever been used. That's one query, and it would have told you years ago there was no steering wheel here. And third, the primary sources are free and fast. A government insolvency register and a public node told me more in an afternoon than every article about this project put together. And everything I did is reproducible. Don't take my word for it. That's rather the point. So that's Root Network 101. And genuinely, big thank you to For the King for this one. This video exists because he asked a sharp question and didn't let me off with a lazy answer. If you've got a project you want pulled apart like this, drop it in the comments. That's where these come from. Everything's sourced in the write-up linked below. And if this is useful, subscribing genuinely helps. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one.